Welcome to the Spirit Sessions podcast. I'm your guide, Katie Silcox, bringing you your weekly self-love soundbite. Join us, where I'll help you find your true spiritual home, where every single aspect of you is holy ground, holy ground, holy ground, holy ground.
This is Spirit Session Podcast with Katie Silcox. Venga chicos, empezamos.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. All engine running. Liftoff. We have a liftoff.
Hi everyone, Katie here. This podcast is intended to inspire you, educate you, and most importantly, support you on your journey towards knowing who you really are, that inner self, that inner teacher. I am not a psychologist or a medical doctor and do not offer professional health or medical advice on this podcast. If you are suffering from any kind of psychological or medical issue, please do the right thing and seek help from your qualified health professional. Everyone, I am so honored today to have Claire Ragozzino on the Spirit Sessions podcast. Claire is an Ayurvedic practitioner. She has an extensive background in holistic nutrition and natural cooking. Like so many of our teachers, she has a background in yoga, Ayurveda, and a woman of my own heart, a real effort at bringing these ancient methodologies to the modern woman. She is also the author of the best-selling book, Living Ayurveda, a comprehensive Ayurvedic cookbook and lifestyle manual. I've seen your book, Claire. It is so beautiful. Huge congrats on the book and welcome to Spirit Sessions.
Thank you, Katie. It's so nice to be here and in such good company. And congratulations too on your new release.
Thank you.
I know books are a labor of love and there's a lot that goes in alone behind the scenes. And so big congratulations on that birth
Thank you.
into the world.
Yeah, it's, when you've written a book, you get it. It is a huge output, and yet so much input as well. I've received so much love since it's been published. So it's definitely a two-way road, as I'm sure your book is as well. So
Absolutely.
Claire, our listeners know we have a year-long school. You're in our level 1 curriculum. And I literally specifically told my staff, I want us to have someone to come in to teach on cooking. And you have a class in Shakti School called Embodied Nourishment. Tell us a little bit, before we get into kind of your story and your journey, what does embodied nourishment mean? And how is that different from regular old nourishment?
For me, embodied nourishment is about being in direct communication with myself and not having to look out towards whether I'm eating the right macronutrients or whether protein is good and fat is bad and carbs are good and this is bad. And, all of the noise that is within our modern world now of food, there's a lot of dietary confusion. And I have come to this Ayurvedic lineage as a way to get clear on what my relationship to myself is and to food. And so I really see embodied relationship as a constant communication with my needs and a practice of listening and a practice of also honoring what I need in this time, because who I was 10 years ago is not who I am now, and it's not where I am at in the stage of my life. And so I believe as Divya Alter says that Ayurvedic food is about eating what is right for you right now. And I think that that's what embodied nourishment is. It's about being in constant communication with yourself and not being stuck to the lists and the labels of what eating can be.
Yeah, it's like such music to my ears. And one of the reasons we love having you in the school, and one of the impetuses forward towards what I've coined feminine form Ayurveda, and why I kind of had to come up with a nomenclature around the way that we approach Ayurveda is that and we get these students or interested people ask us this question, like, well, isn't Ayurveda all about these food lists and doshas and food rules and food lists and food rules? And I'm like, yeah, it kind of is in a lot of the way that we could say it's been translated throughout time. And we're kind of returning back to that, what you call embodied nourishment, I call like big mama medicine, where
I love that.
we throw the lists out the window, but at the same time, we hold them in our other hand. It's like masculine and feminine of, we get that question a lot, like, is Ayurveda going to exacerbate my eating disorder or my food obsession issues?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
we always
And
say,
I have seen it exacerbate that when you approach it with the
yeah,
wrong view. Yeah.
yeah,
And I've been there myself.
that,
So I
yeah,
have compassion for that.
right.
Having, and I'm sure you've been there too.
Yeah.
It's easy to, I think it's human, it's in our nature to want to get things right, because when we get things right, we feel like we can control the outcome.
Mm,
And when we know, okay, I'm going to do that again, then X, A plus B equals C. But for me, big mama medicine, which I love, our embodied nourishment is like, hey, it doesn't always, it's not always the same experience every time. So you can learn the lists. And I think the lists are really helpful when you are learning.
helpful, super helpful. Yeah.
And then you get to use your senses. So, if you take a cherry, for example, a cherry, if it's picked right at 80 degrees, is like this perfect sweetness. It bursts in your mouth. It gives this like sense of, luscious summer satisfaction. And then you pick a cherry at the wrong time and you get another one in the same bag. And oh my God, it's sour. Your mouth is like puckering. Your face is like, oh, I don't really like that. And you eat a whole bunch of sour cherries. And what happens? You're overheated.
Mm.
And that sense of like, okay, but cherries are supposed to be this, but I'm experiencing this. I think it's important to look at the lists and the rules and to get to understand that language, but then to use that direct experience through your senses of how something's really landing for you in this present moment, in what nature is providing and where you're at in this moment.
Mm.
So that's kind of the relationship I like to look at between the lists and the rules and the understanding, and then taking the training wheels off and practicing what is this like in the real day today.
It's like you learn how to play the scales when you're learning an instrument, and then
Mm.
you throw out that boring scales book and you start writing your own music or you start improvising, and that's where that real mastery and creativity come. And so that's what I tell students. It's like, well, in the beginning, I'm thinking about a friend of mine in Ohio, and if you've never heard about qualities of certain foods, it's like astounding. I was speaking to this friend and going, yeah, so salads are cold, ice water is cold, raw foods are cold, and listing some of the foods that we wouldn't necessarily want to eat during the winter. And it's
Mhm.
the light bulb goes on. And this person that's never heard of this in their life is like, that makes total sense. But I hadn't thought about it before. And so, what are the foods that I can eat right now that are going to warm me up? And then it's all super
Mhm.
intuitive. Here's a question I have for you, Claire. So, and I think about this often and I talk about this with students often. There's a field I'm sure you're very familiar with called intuitive eating, right? And then you have every other crazy system, right? And so there's this real draw amongst the women that come to Shakti school and myself towards intuitive eating. And yet in Ayurveda, it specifically says if your biochemistry is out of balance, and out of balance for some of us for a really long time, let's say you've been growing up eating corn dogs and McDonald's, you crave that, right? And so
Mhm.
this person sits down and maybe what they think is their intuition is telling them to eat things that actually aren't that great. And so there's this real liminal period where you're beginning to trust the rules enough to get the intuitive capacity back online. Have you thought about this? I'm sure you have.
Oh, yes. I have thought about this because sometimes my intuition, especially this time
Exactly.
of year, if I had my camera turned around, you could see my Christmas tree
Mm.
decorated with little oranges, which now all the ants are eating. So I'm facing
By the
away
way,
from the tree.
guys, Claire is in Kauai, Hawaii.
Yeah, we don't quite have the distinct seasons here. So I would say this time of year, when it's cold enough to turn my oven on, I love baking. And I start to bake all of these amazing, from Thanksgiving into pumpkin pies, into Christmas, into the cookies. And then all of a sudden, January, I'm like, I have to eat these cookies every day.
My
It's part of
intuition
me
is
that my
same.
intuition is telling me I need to feed this sugar, right? And probably till about late January, my Agni can withstand that. And then there's this turning point where all of a sudden now we're moving into kapha time of year. Even here in the tropics where it's not as distinct. And each year that I'm here, I experience this of, oh yeah, February is the month where I need to start paying attention to this weaker digestive capacity. And so if I'm really noticing, okay, those cookies, which were really satisfying and fun and brought joy and connection and love and presence, and dare I even say Shakti moved through some of those recipes, and it was beautiful.
Your heart, 100%.
And then there's the attachment. There's
Mm.
the gripping, the controlling, the things that excess sweet taste can bring. And when you start to really pay attention, and to me, that's what Ayurveda is. It's about getting curious and it's about paying attention. How does this make me feel? Okay, that cookie was so the medicine. Okay, now that cookie is making me feel kind of heavy, kind of dull, kind of sticky, kind of fatigued in the afternoon. That sugar anymore isn't the medicine. And so with this awareness, this overlay of Ayurveda, I can start to look at, this is an observed time, an observed time-tested wisdom that, hey, as we move into late winter, early spring, this is kapha time of year. So when I'm paying attention, I can start to see, I should bring in a little bit more pungency and more ginger and maybe more bitters and bring in some more cooked greens and things. But a lot of the times my intuition is clouded because I'm in either a rajasic or tamasic state.
Or you're just full of cookies.
Or I'm just full of cookies, and I'd rather lay around and watch White Lotus on the couch.
Oh my God, I love you. You're a girl after my own heart.
However, this is why I think these practices exist, so we can return to them. And in spring each year, I do some kind of digestive reset. For 12 years now, I've been doing seasonal cleanses. And I always find, even when there's resistance and even when it's imperfect, I can get in there and create a little bit more space just to be a loving witness to what's going on in my mind. And it's oftentimes the mind that's saying, yeah, I really need to be in that comfort zone. I really need to be in that animal realm of like feeding all of my cravings. But what do I really need here? And by creating that space for just observing through these cleanses, it becomes less about controlling the food, but about simplifying the diet to create space to see and to listen. And so I think that it requires, intuition is a very subtle thing. It's very elusive. And sometimes you can be really tuned in and riding that with clarity. And other times I think that in my own experience, I can feel like I'm grasping for that. And so when I am in that space of that lack of clarity and lack of connection to the intuition, I have structure. And I think that Ayurveda can provide structure and lists and rules. They can give us a little bit of discipline, and they can give us a little bit of stability to anchor back into what is real. Because as much as I love being in the subtle realms, and I'm sure you and I could talk a lot about those things within the subtle, we're in this planet, we're on the earth, we're in this dualistic world. We need to know how to respond and to care for ourselves. And that's what I see this wisdom of Ayurveda is like this handbook for humans about how to live in a dualistic world and to care for our bodies and to use certain plants and to understand the aspects of the sun and the moon and how it's affecting us through the course of the year, which used to be really intuitive. And I live here in Hawaii in a culture where Hawaiian culture is still very much alive, and we're, observing planting seasons according to the moon. And there's lots of things within the natural world that's still being passed on through the generations. But I think that in the West now, it's largely hidden. I don't want to say lost, it's hidden. And I think that when we reconnect with that, it's teaching us how to be in the body. And then when we have an anchor point in our bodies through ritual, through routine, through connecting in with these natural rhythms, then we can also be in the subtle with the intuition and can guide us. So I think you need to have that structure in order to let the vata play also.
Yeah. Yeah. I think Dr. Halpern in one of my classes was like, Shakti needs structure to flow through. Otherwise, she's crazy, or she's too wild and she blows up the room. And so I remember reading a Janine Roth book on, is that her name? Janine Roth or Gab? Yeah, I think that's her name. She wrote Women, Food, and God. And I remember reading this book and just thinking, and she said, your relationship to food is a direct mirror to your relationship with God. And I thought, wow, I'm like having really quickies with God, and there was like an invitation to kind of look at food in a whole new way. For me, for so long, and even still to this day, it's something that I work with. And we had Sandia Ramaswamy, who's one of our teachers, on the podcast last week, and you'll come out this week. And I really love it because you guys have like a very similar topic. And she's this like luscious, coffalicious Indian woman. And she's like, look, sometimes, with her Indian accent, she's like, sometimes I just binge eat popcorn and watch Netflix. And I am the ritual, and I'm in the ritual and I'm so happy. And I just like, there was such a healing in me in that moment of, I think that we also have the idea that we have to sit down and like pray and do everything perfectly and chew the food to 50 bites, 50 chews to consistency, blah, 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 which is ideal. But then there's this feminine path, which is like the eros, the eroticism and the pleasure and the enjoyment of food, and just giving ourselves that permission also to let it be emotionally soothing, which food has always been my mother and my father, right? It's like the thing I go to when I need mothering and fathering. And to take that away is a huge ask, right? When it's been that for you for so long. And as I, continue my spiritual path and my therapeutic path, like it becomes less and less survival, and there's like more room. But I think there's also something true about food is our survival and it is emotionally nourishing. And to dance that tantric line between disease and comfort, So I'm curious, because it's amazing to me that you're like making the cookies and the pies and like, and that's just so beautiful, right? To be able to enjoy that and know that your Agni, your digestive fire, can handle it, and know that you'll have a different experience in February when you're in a more reductive phase.
Yeah, the words that keep coming to me is like, there's a place for austerity and then there's a place for celebration. I think that tuning in is giving yourself permission to be in celebration. I just got married last month and it was extremely stressful for 9 months leading up to it. I wasn't digesting anything.
Wow.
And as I was having more digestive discomforts, that part of me got triggered and saying, you need to be more rigid. You need to be more disciplined. You need to be taking more herbs. You need to be doing this. This sense of gripping control. And then what happened was a stress response, even more so in my body.
Right. Then you're even more bloated.
Yeah. And then you're more constipated, or you're
Right.
having more diarrhea, or whatever your,
Right.
Your natural tendencies are. Those things were activated 110% in myself. And I kept reminding myself, okay, this is just a season you're in life right now. So be sweet with yourself, be sweet with yourself. And lo and behold, a month later, all of a sudden I'm like, oh, I can digest again. Oh, I'm relaxed again. And
was it after the wedding?
Yes.
Yeah.
It's after the wedding.
You're like, and then miraculously 3 days before the wedding, I had this surge of the parasympathetic. You're like, no. And I think that's important for the listeners to hear. Like, when I had my book coming out, I could not sleep. And then you crave carbs and sugar, and like it creates this spiral. And it was like, as soon as the book parties were over, sleep was perfection again. So I think there is just this acceptance of the era that you're living, whether it be a wedding or a celebration. Those are happy things, but they're stressful.
They are. And like any change, it's vata provoking.
Mhm.
Any change. It can be a positive change. It can be a challenging change, a move, a change of jobs, a birth of a child, whatever it is. When the vata is aggravated, we can count on Agni being dissipated. So yeah, aggravated also. So I think that the the idea that has helped me soften out of that time where I feel really rigid and fearful. I don't know if you've ever felt fearful of food. Like I can share a bit of my story here and that
Yeah, no, I
when
never felt fearful or upset around food. Just kidding. Yes. Child, sweet, sweet young thing. I'm a child of the 1980s. Everyone's super confused right now about their gender, but when we were young, everyone had an eating disorder. So
I
like
know.
I completely understand that realm.
I know. And I'm like, well, this is how I tell stories. I think of what I want to say, and then somehow I have to give you 20 pre-stories to get there. So I'll try to condense it here. My parents were both pilots. I essentially gestated in the air, which
Wow.
fascinates me. My mom flew until she was 7 months pregnant. So it
Wow.
doesn't surprise me. And then as soon as I was born, we moved several times. It doesn't surprise me that I had chronic constipation, that I had lots of bloating and air and anxiety and reproductive menstrual challenges, these kinds of things. Like, oh, I can have so much compassion for seeing that this prakriti is high vata. And so as I got into my teens, I started having this intense chronic constipation where I would go up to a month without being able to have a bowel movement, no matter the herbs, whatever I was doing. But what was I also doing? I was eating a raw foods diet in Alaska, where I grew up. So here I am eating all these imported cashews and pineapples and raw lentils and kale salads and feeling
In
like I'm
Alaska.
in Alaska.
Oh my God, this is
Grew
an
up.
amazing story.
And my bless my parents who were like, okay, sure, we'll eat your raw lentil soup for breakfast on this cold December morning, or your food with so much nutritional yeast. But they were really supportive of me exploring food as a pathway for healing. I would come home and I would juice and I would gather seaweed from the beach and take these seaweed baths and do these long juice fasts. And I actually was feeling better because as a child of the 90s, I ate Go-Gurts and Lunchables and Sonic hot dogs and,
Yep.
and every possible fast food thing under the sun because that was what my family knew. They're pilots. We ate on the go. For me, even starting to have a hand on the food felt very healing. I didn't understand that having all those dry, rough, cold, raw foods in a cold climate where I was already having a major vata vitiation was just going to increase the bloating, increase the constipation, increase the anxiety that I was feeling. So it wasn't until later on into my 20s where I had started having this experience of cooked food. It was actually a boyfriend at the time, or an almost boyfriend, who's like, let me cook you this pot of soup. We'd done yoga together. He was going to make me this soup. And in my mind, I thought, no way, that is cooked. You understand how unhealthy that is, cooking your food. You're destroying all the essential nutrients and da 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 da. And was rattling off all these facts from my mind. And he spent 3 hours making this beautiful, slow cooked soup. I remember eating it and my stomach just feeling like this sense of, oh, okay, I feel better. So I had another bowl and like, I think I went to the bathroom after that. I'm like, oh my God, I'm pooping. Like, this is amazing. What is this witchcraft cooked food? And so it was this moment though of like moving from the mind into the body and really sensing how I felt. And everything that I had been reading and studying about Ayurveda came to life in this moment. It was like my light bulb moment of this bowl of soup. And it wasn't just information about lists of food charts that I should and shouldn't eat, but oh, this is what it means by like increases like when I'm eating superfood smoothies. Katie, I used to make superfood smoothies, big mason jar. I would sit on a heating pad to eat them in December. I really felt like, oh, but I'm eating all these right things for me. I'm eating all these optimized foods. And I see this now where we have this fascination with like, oh, that's good. I should eat more of it. I should have more. And then we start trying to isolate, like turmeric's good. Let's pull out that curcumin compound and let's have all these curcumin supplements. Or soy, oh, that has a lot of protein. It's vegetarian. We'll make soy isolates and protein bars. And all of a sudden we're not eating things that are connected to the whole. So it's no surprise to me that we've become so confused and disconnected with our own inherent wholeness when everything is just isolated aspects that feel confusing. And we are living from so much information. I mean, with Instagram now, it's so much information, and then your algorithm is curating to tell you what you think you should be doing. And it's just one big echo chamber of right and wrong. And I think what has really freed me from that is recognizing like the power of simple, whole food, cooked diet, prepared and eaten with an attitude of love, and the peace and ease that creates within the body. And recognizing too, there are seasons where you'll have strong digestion and feel really juicy and great. And there will be times where perhaps you're working with stress or other things that are impacting your system. And to me, the wisdom of Ayurveda is just knowing how to be in that dynamic dance as life continues to happen and things can push you off of that center of stability, but you're coming back into yourself.
Oh, Claire, I think that long, beautiful story is one of my favorites I've ever heard on the podcast. Like,
Oh, great.
Story of Claire's Boyfriend's Soup is the title I'll give it. And why I love it so much is like, this speaks to the more subtle realm of awakening, where it's just 1 degree to the left or to the right, right? But like, we're so fixated on that cognition, on the mind's certainty around thought process, logic, the way things have been, and the way we think things will be. The way that we even think things are is almost always wrong, especially in dealing with relationships, whether it be other people or ourselves. So when we shift the perspective, just that tiny 1 degree to the realm of, I don't really know, like you called it curiosity. And then all of a sudden we're in the realm of energy, and you called it the body, right? And in the realm of energy that is synonymous to the goddess, that is synonymous to the body, that is nature, that realm is actually psychedelic. It's actually limitless. It's actually speaks in terms of silence and sensation and pulsation and warmth and knowingness. And it doesn't speak in terms of top-down cognition, food lists, or like you were citing the statistics around food enzymes to your boyfriend or almost boyfriend. But I just think and I guess the summary I'm finding of all of this in my own practice as a prana obsessionado is humility, right? And like, so just a simple ritual that we can do is just putting our hand on our heart and pausing and feeling into what the body is really wanting to eat. And it takes less than 30 seconds. I sometimes will even, and I don't have your book yet, but yours is coming because now I know that I must have it, and all our listeners should get it. But sometimes I'll just pull a cookbook or 6 off the shelf and I'll just flip through them and I'll wait to feel, oh, I want to make that. And so I think it can be this sort of dynamic, interactive, creative, curious, fun experience rather than what it's been for so many of us, which is sort of like a mean gym coach telling you what to do.
You know, and that mean gym coach also probably gave some structure. So I feel like there, again, I'm going to come back to this idea of like, when you're learning, discipline is great, you know, and discipline doesn't have to be mean, and it doesn't have to be shaming when you miss a day of doing X, Y, and Z of your sadhana. Like, that's not the kind of discipline I'm talking about. I'm talking about that sense of devotion where you're like, I really am curious about this thing called Ayurveda. What is it like when I do this? Or what is it like when I give myself 1 week of doing nasya every morning and seeing what happens? Or what is it like when I do 1 week of meal planning and how do I feel? And I think having bite-sized goals of time, not like, hey, I'm just doing and
Ayurveda, everything.
and and all of a sudden my family, there's a death in the family, or I unexpectedly had to move, or whatever comes up. I got COVID as I did right before the wedding, these things that come up that push you off your center. Ayurveda isn't there to say, you're not doing this right. You need to do this in this way, right? It's looking at realistically, like, what am I needing in this time that's in front of me? And so I think as you're learning and exploring these things, having a shopping list or an idea of 4 or 5 meals you might want to make through the week, something new that you're going to try, is a really valuable, tangible thing to lean into when you're getting to know yourself. And then it becomes like, oh, I know how much time that takes, or oh, I intuitively know the amount of cumin to put based on the smell, and oh, I'm having some gas, maybe I'll put some more cumin with this instead of coriander. And it just starts to become, again, like a relationship where you can trust and continue to pull into what you need in that moment without so much doubt and confusion.
I also want listeners to understand this word discipline is coming from the word disciple, which is a altar that we create in the heart towards something bigger than ourselves. And if we say that swasta, health, is the altar that we're praying to in Vedic medicine, but obviously we mean all levels of health, I think it's also important in the loving, very divine mothery conversation around, quote, intuitive eating. I kind of bring in that more structured approach and say that's not actually enough, because sometimes we actually do need to, like for myself, I indulge. My tendency is a little bit more pitta kapha, and like I'll overindulge. And when I eat vegetables, salmon, grass-fed meats, good high quality fats, sweet potatoes, right? Like I've got a list of foods that work for me. And it's a very big, robust list that actually does include the Ayurveda, purists are going to be shocked, but like with this much pitta, like I
Are we going to say the thing that people will yell at us in all caps about on our websites later?
Tell me, what is it?
Are we saying MEAT?
Oh, no. Yeah, we're going to say
Okay.
anything we want. Yeah, no, people don't yell at me about that one, but I've gotten yelled at for being everything that's wrong with Ayurveda because I have a Vitamix. And I'm like, dude, do you seriously? First of all of us are reincarnated Ayurvedic practitioners from India. Secondly, do you not think that our foremothers and forefathers would use a Vitamix if they had one back in the day? Like, it's incredible, right?
Absolutely. I mean, I contemplate these things a lot because I'm embarking on a new project that is all about an omnivore's approach of Ayurvedic cooking. And I say, I just spell out meat because having come from a raw vegan and then vegetarian and then easing into ghee and then bringing in raw milk and then, easing back into this really, truly all-encompassing whole foods diet, I have been looking at the classical texts. I've been looking at what Charaka says about all food substances and cooking processes. I've been looking at what the Bhojana Kutuhalam, which is like this 16th century compilation of Ayurveda's greatest hits that someone gifted me once. And it's an awesome book on all things food, what the Bhava Prakasha, all these texts say. And there's all these methods for cooking and transforming the qualities of the food. And I have to reflect when this was written and the access to electricity, the access to, there were communal ways of cooking where, maybe we weren't using a Vitamix because the amount of time it would take an individual to hand grind something. We had communities coming together to hand grind the wheat and the harvest to make flour. And that's not where we're at anymore as a society. So I think it's so important to look at some of the tools that we do have access to now. I don't know who's giving you flack about a vitamin.
Well, it's more become it was long, long ago, but it's more become a joke because I eat smoothies every now and then, and I have such high pitta that blueberry greens smoothies really help me out, and so that's that
Mhm.
great example of what the Charaka Samhita actually says, which is it must be adapted to the time, the place, and the people in which it's being
Mhm.
presented, which tells me that the
Desha
Charaka
Kalapatra.
was so advanced in its psychic thinking about its future generations of users. And then secondly, that Ayurveda is not a one size fits all. The whole ethos of this science or this philosophy is that it's individualized, specialized medicine. That's its
Mhm.
that's its whole thing, right?
It is timeless. And when you do read about things, there are some like, okay, I'm probably not going to drink the urine from a brown spotted cow facing the direction at da da da,
Well,
that you read in like the,
we just did a whole episode with Kate Stillman on drinking urine and poop. So she can
I'll
teach
check
you
it
about
out.
that if you do want to do those extreme practices. But yeah, we're probably not going to do that tomorrow.
We're probably not going to do that tomorrow. And most of us, let's say you're living in New York, you're not going to have access to a brown spotted cow of a certain kind. Like those kinds of things might not be relevant. But when you read about eating, desha, the place and the time, and for the individual, that is timeless.
Mhm.
And how brilliant that this wisdom moves beyond that boundary of time to speak to where we're at now. And I think that's so essential to look at what is available, what is realistic. And then also now I think we have this interesting layer of kind of needing to reclaim a little bit of more self-awareness and how to use our discernment to choose what is right for us at
And
this time.
I teach a class in Shakti school on sacred sexuality, and it's always a really popular class, and of course, and it's a delicate and sensitive topic as well, because we also want to watch our tendency as modern humaners to we either go back into the past and think everyone was a heathen, or we go back into the past and think everyone was a wise elder woman. And neither of those are true. They were humans just like us, and they had certain connections that maybe we've lost, and they had certain things that we do have an awareness of. And I think there's this tendency to idealize the past and to like essentialize groups of people, and no, like we're all just humans. And so when we look at something like the Kama Sutra, we can look at the Charaka or these older books with the same eyes of appreciation and respect. But also the Kama Sutra was written for men by men about male
Right.
sexuality. And so like cool. And it's so sad that like modern Western women are like, let's use the Kama Sutra, darling, because we're so bereft of like any kind of sexual wisdom. And so what I tell
Right.
students, it's like, you guys, we have to write our own sex manuals that are based in a holistic perspective. And I feel the same way about Claire, what you're doing, right? It's a revivification of the respect towards the principles, first principles, but without getting into fundamentalism, which can happen in any religion or food religion, as you well know.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think that that desire to think that there's any one right way for everyone. I mean, that's the essence of Ayurveda, is that it's the individual's medicine. So to think that any one diet, any one sadhana, any one, anything forever is going to help you find immortality. It's confusion. That is a confused way of applying this knowledge. It's not vidya, it's avidya. So to really pierce through that veil and to know that this Ayurvedic wisdom, it isn't going to prevent you from dying, right? We're not immortal. It's not going to prevent you from having, from repeating patterns of difficulty that you might be working through in your life. Can it help you understand yourself and have a toolkit to bring you back towards your center and to have more grace as you move through that? I mean, was I constipated while traveling last month? Totally. Like Ayurveda, it's so much more than just a prescription, because A plus B doesn't always equal C. That's not what we're approaching it for. It's really about learning how to have this all-encompassing approach to life that is graceful and that has faith in the process, and to not become overly zealous or fundamental about any one thing. It really is, in some ways, this middle path, which I think has given me a lot more forgiveness for not getting it right all the time, if that makes any sense.
100%. And I want to say, like, everything Claire is saying, listeners, this is the ethos of why I created the Shakti School, why I created our Ayurveda program, because of this longing for the primacy of the individual's heart, right? That like
Mm.
delicate, super personal, super sacred place where you are the actor in the story, making those decisions, getting great advice, right? Like we have like amazing different teachers, and Claire, I'm just so glad you're one of them, and you really get what I'm trying to put out there, which is, guys, it's not about the food list, like it's about soul, and the
Mhm.
soul's journeying and the soul's evolution, and the way that food is the first spiritual yoga, right?
Mhm.
And how can we approach that with reverence, but also humor? And I love that you are reminding the listeners and me that, like, you're gonna get constipated when you travel, or Katie Silcox is gonna get fiery and passionate with, her man, or eat too much, salt and spice, which is like, put some more hot sauce on it. Yeah, that's a good idea. Right. So like, I just love just that acceptance of a doshic universe on that mortal level. And I'm working right now in my own practice of being able to distinguish the physical from the energetic. And, it really is allowing me to accept that imbalances, that I've had chronic health issues my whole life, similar to you, like a little bit more on the pitta side, but
Mhm.
that might always be there, right? And
Yeah.
and like there's this sort of, and I mean, I run one of the world's most well-known Ayurveda schools, and there's all this pressure I put on myself to like have perfect health, and that might not really be the tantric journey that we're on. And there's a way that, because I have the imbalances that I do really understand through a compassionate lens what it's like to have a chronic health issue. And if I just had this perfect
Mhm.
health, I can assure you I would not have started Ayurveda school. I would not have created
Mhm.
a platform for women. Like, just like you would never have created this whole
No.
world of serving people.
To go back to that definition of svasta, sva, to be seated in yourself. Like you are here to fulfill your dharma. And that doesn't always mean perfect health means being free from all suffering,
That's
but
right.
it's having a right relationship to that path that you're here to be on. And I think if the goal is to be free completely from any challenges of life, then you'll never see the fruits of any practice. So if
Mm,
the goal is really to be seated in yourself and what you're here to do, then being able to embrace when those ripples come, or sometimes those 40-foot swell out there. I'm not a big wave surfer, but I like to just dive underneath and pretend like I can be in that steady current underneath. And I think you really can when your mind is oriented to that. When you can really recognize that, yeah, currents are going to come, waves are going to come, life is going to be rocky, things are going to push you off of your center. And that very definition of stability is, I think, goes deeper. And this is what Ayurveda's view on health is. It's svasta, to be seated in the self, but it's to have the alignment of the body, the physical, the mind, the senses, and the soul. So when you're looking at that larger view, those what look like 40-foot swell from the ground are like, oh, they're just little ripples. I can handle this. And I think that that right orientation and having community too to help strengthen and foster that, hey, this is why we're here. It makes when things are difficult or a little rocky feel, oh, okay, I've got a system, I've got right thinking, I've got community that'll help me move through these times. That's how I've been reflecting on Ayurveda lately as I'm moving into my complete householder stage of life of marriage and babies and all these things that sometimes I fear like, oh my gosh, are they going to take me away from my freedom to be meditating in the cave and reflecting on the subtle? And now, oh yeah, actually I can bring these things into all of my worldly responsibilities. And even if I'm baking more than I'm medicine making right now, it's exactly where I'm meant to be. Having a wider view of how you can apply this wisdom to your life, it's just giving me a big exhale as I think about it. It's like, oh yeah, I don't have to worry so much if I'm doing it right to a T, because it's a life path that I've committed to be on, and more than a list of right or wrongs in my day to day.
Claire, if there was one practice we can leave our lovely listeners with in terms of how they can right now, tonight, when they go into their kitchen to make dinner, become a little bit more embodied in their nourishment.
Mm.
There was a simple, practical thing that we can leave folks with. What would it be?
If you're standing, anchor your feet to the earth. If you're sitting, connect with your seat. Take 5 deep, steady breaths. Calm the mind. Get out of the sympathetic nervous system as you breathe. And as you relax and tune in, just ask yourself 2 simple questions. What's present right now? What am I noticing? What's the state of my digestion? Is my mind racing? Is my mind dull? Is my body feeling, heavy? Do I have sharp hunger? How's my body today? How's my mind today? And the second part of that question is, what do I need? How am I feeling? What do I need? And when we can get out of the frenzy and we just listen, you'll probably see what's available in your fridge. Oh, I've just got a sweet potato and this sad looking piece of broccoli. Okay, what can I make here now? Okay, I'll put some ghee on that. That's going to help ground me. And okay, I can make something fun from what's here. But instead of worrying and doubting, those 2 simple questions of just checking in, what's present, what's needed. And I think that can help guide you towards whatever it is that you're navigating, whether it be dinner or whether it be a larger life decision. I think that's a great practice to anchor into.
Thank you. I'm gonna go write that on a card and put it in my kitchen altar tonight.
I love that.
Claire,
You and I can clearly talk about the subtle things all
yes,
the time, but
well,
hopefully this practice gave something grounded to be in the
that
body a little
really
bit
is
more.
that really is the subtle, though. That is the subtle, and we want to have you back when you have your new book, Omnivore's Approach to Ayurveda. Is that the title?
Working title. Working title.
That's just so needed. And like, how can people find you if they want your website? We'll put all of your links in the show notes, but just if people want to know more about your work and your books and what you offer.
Yeah, thank you. vidyaliving.com is my website. I offer a year-long instead of guided towards becoming a professional practitioner, a home study practice called Living Ayurveda. It's an immersion that brings the book to life season by season. That's my kind of core program and how I'm inspiring people to connect with these practices at home for themselves, for their families. And then I'm also starting in this new year an Omnivore's cooking club, Ayurveda cooking club. So I'll be releasing weekly recipes and just inspiring this idea of quick, approachable weekday recipes and more fun, playful weekend recipes. And so I'll be sharing more of that.
I want to be in the Omnivore's cooking club.
Yeah, come join. And it's just fun. I think food is such a fun medium. You can really play around with it. It's cross-cultural, it's political, it's social, it's everything, but really at the essence of it, it's love. And I think food can be that platform for sharing love with your loved ones and with yourself. And you get 1,095 meals a year to play around with.
Wow,
So
that's amazing.
I know, I did that math the other day. I'm like, wow, that's a lot of meals, which can be daunting or it can be really exciting. You're going to have some really basic, getting through the day kind of meals and some really fun ones. So my hope with this recipe club is just to inspire more connection in the kitchen and I'll be launching that probably in February. So stay tuned for that as it comes up.
Well, we're so glad to have had you on Spirit Sessions. This was an amazing conversation. I'm sure everyone will really resonate with. And what an honor to have you as a part of Shakti School. This is definitely the approach that we take as well. So thank you so much for being here, Claire.
Thank you so much. I've been looking forward to this conversation for a while now. So it's a joy to get to connect and chat more about these things that light us up.
Likewise. Wonderful. All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
A big special thanks to Kevin Carlisle of Goodbye Gemini, who wrote this beautiful podcast music, and to DJ Juan Pablo Jimenez in southern Spain for mixing it and making it magic.